Andrew Murphy, CEO of Conference Rentals, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of the Event Tech Talk Show. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got started in the events industry to start off with?
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me. I think my story is very similar to others in the event industry. I didn't intend to be in the event industry. I got into it through audio. Kind of going all the way back, I started in middle school doing audio for like the school theater. And then in high school, like a lot of audio techs, I was in a band and really into the music. And I decided to go to actual college for audio engineering, which most people don't do. They learn it, through actual experience. So I went to college, got a degree in audio engineering. And then from there, I during that time I was recording music and doing live audio, and I really liked, movies and making audio for movies. And so from there I got out of college and tried to get into that industry a little bit, and was interning and not really making a lot of money at the time. And this was also 2007, 2008. And there was, the global financial crisis. There was like a Hollywood writer strike at the time, so it just wasn't working out. So I found a job as like a support engineer at this company called Media Vision.
Okay.
And Media Vision was the sister company of Conference Rental. And so after about a year of working at Media Vision, I transferred over to Conference Rental. And the rest is history. We got into doing events, and at the time, Conference Rental was kind of just starting off, and kind of helped it grow into what it is today.
And what did Conference Rental look like at those start years? What type of events were you working on? What were you delivering for those shows and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really even an events company at that time. We had a small inventory, and we were basically just renting conference microphone systems. Mm-hmm. We didn't own a lot of interpretation equipment at the time. So we were basically renting to hotels, other audiovisual companies, those who just needed it for small board meetings and seminars. We had one office in San Francisco, and then slowly we opened up an office in DC and New York, and kind of the strategic locations. And really, we're just a sub-rental company on, this very niche market.
What do you think made Conference Rentals at that time successful? Why would a company come to you for a product rather than buy it in themselves and stock it and just deal with it themselves?
I mean, a lot of companies did have this, but we would rent to audiovisual companies, and kind of it's a very niche type of product that people aren't using on a regular basis. So it's, you have to think about the ROI on these sort of things, like how many times do I have to rent this in order to buy it? So that was kind of our business model, is we'd really have, we filled a niche of, clients who didn't use this all the time.
It's really fascinating, this, because I see this a lot across lots of different like supply chains. There's a company in the UK that does all of the AV equipment for like direct sales, but then also provides that as like a rental solution. I think they even go as far as they will even buy equipment back from suppliers and then resell that as, like, they call it nearly new, because a lot of this equipment actually doesn't actually go on the road sometimes for events for a very long time, does it, before it's kind of restocked with the next iteration of that piece of equipment, because the equipment and stuff moves sometimes quite fast. So it's fascinating to me that there's layers to this, isn't it? It's like peeling back an onion. There's layers of like supply chain in the events industry before it actually gets to the
And I think how Conference Rental actually started was, the Media Vision was selling all this equipment, and then, what if I need more of this equipment and I just needed, 15 more microphones for my event, but I bought 30, right? And so it's just like, supplementing what they didn't have. And so there was that need there. And so that's kind of, the foundation of the business.
And how did you, as a company, then ensure that you also had enough stock for the demand? Because I would imagine it would ebb and flow quite often, right, in terms of like time of year or scale of events, or maybe big annual events that come in once in a while and stuff like
the seasonality. I mean, we invested a lot based on the events that were coming up. So if we had enough time to plan for these things, we'd say, oh, we have X amount of stock and we know this big event is coming in usually it's, the fall season, September through November is kind of the peak time.
Yeah.
So we'd really get an understanding, all right, how much equipment do we need for this season? And we would invest over the summer and kind of boost up the stock and hope we had enough equipment for that season. Obviously, it's always a good thing if your shelves are empty as well. So
yeah, there's a company in the UK, quite a large AV company, that was one of the first things when I got into the industry. They pointed out to me. I went into their warehouse. I was like, you don't have anything. And they were like, yeah, it's because we're busy.
That's a good thing.
That's a
Right.
good sign, kind of thing. So yeah, stock on the shelves means that you're not busy. You're not doing work and stuff like that. So you transitioned, if my show notes are correct, into the CEO role earlier this year, correct?
Yes.
Before that, you were managing director.
That's correct. Yeah.
So what took that? What kind of, I guess, made that transition happen? What was it that was happening within conference rentals that led you to the CEO role?
So I mean, as the managing director, I was doing all the day-to-day, operation, and very involved in the events. And when I get, since I became CEO, not a ton has changed, in that actual day-to-day role.
Yeah.
But as a CEO, what I'm trying to now do is kind of figure out what's the next opportunity for us. Staying on top of innovation in the market, which is really key, especially in the language interpretation market with AI and all these new technologies that are coming out. There's a lot more various competitions coming in. So it's really key to have, the right technology, the right resources, the right innovation to make sure we're going in the right direction and we're not kind of just stuck in the old ways of renting out the same equipment that we always have. So that's kind of been my focus in the CEO role. And I think we found that need in the company where, a managing director role was kind of just running the business, but now it's like the big strategic idea behind it. How can we start growing? And also the global kind of aspect of it. We've been finding ourselves more and more doing events outside of the United States, here in Dubai, obviously. We're in Europe a lot, went to Australia, Singapore. So we're traveling around the world with our clients. So we're also trying to figure out how can we, mobilize a little bit better and better serve our clients that way.
And what would you say from your previous role as managing director prepared for you for that transition into CEO role? Was there skills? I mean, obviously time saved in the business obviously went massively in your favor to probably make that transition smoother. But is there anything that you think stood out from your previous managing director role that's put you in good stead for the CEO role?
Yeah, I think, all the points that you just said, and then also just kind of having that strategic mindset behind it, like just having the right ideas in order to drive the company forward. So, working with the old CEO for 15, 16 years, like we were on the same page on a lot of things. And then, we were working hand in hand, getting everything done and kind of sharing the ideas and figuring out the strategy moving forward. So I think just going along that path for the last, decade plus really kind of put me in position there.
If you don't mind me digging into that a little bit more, then what would you say would have been one of those unforeseen challenges or things that maybe caught you out since earlier in the year that you now look back and you were like, didn't expect that?
I don't know. That's a tough question.
If there's nothing, that's a perfectly good answer as well.
Nothing huge. I don't think. I think I was already into the weeds in most of the things, so nothing huge has come up. As we look into kind of expanding more globally, these are huge challenges. Yeah. Figuring out various regulations and really the business side of things. Is quite challenging. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, is really just making sure, the infrastructure that we have in place to scale is, properly set up. And then when we move forward and we decide to, open up office locations around the world, we're set up for that. And we follow the right course.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of paperwork and red tape and
the fun stuff.
Late nights looking into like, are we going to get thrown in jail here or something?
Yeah, no, hopefully not.
How have you found through that obviously early journey now that you're expanding into these other territories? How have you found it, getting those things set up and finding partners and things like that, or even the customers and companies? I'm assuming that being set up in those locations is quite important to the event organizers or the brands or the agencies that you're working with then, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, so up until today, we're very much a U.S. company, and we travel around the world doing events. And we have clients, most are based in the U.S., but we also have clients, who are based in the U.K. or Geneva or a lot of wherever the UN agencies are, for instance. That's where a lot of our clients are because we're doing these multilingual events. So we'll really travel with them wherever they go. And for that, we rely on partner networks, obviously. We're not shipping equipment from the US everywhere. Obviously, one, it's not sustainable. Two, it's really expensive. And then three, there's a bunch of logistical issues associated with that. So we're relying on partners a lot in order to do these events. So one of the issues with that is it can change a lot from location to location. So your level of service might not be consistent if you have an event in X location versus another location. And so that's really what we're trying to solve is, hey, how can we be in more control of the business in these locations? And really we're picking the hot locations, for instance, like Dubai, which is a huge events and conference territory. In these locations, how can we have more control of that?
So if there's a company out there listening to this podcast or has become aware of conference rentals recently over the last couple of months or last couple of weeks, what is it that you look for as a CEO when having those discussions with those companies? What does a good partner look like?
I think the biggest thing is for us, it's like the technical know-how and then just the professionalness of the company. Yeah. I don't know if professionalness is the right word, but professionalism of the company. That's the key. Yeah. The clients that we typically have, especially if we're traveling around the world with them, they're very high-end professional clients. So we want to make sure the equipment is new, it's in good shape. The technicians and the local people, they know how to operate, they know how to act professionally, they know how to dress professionally. Yeah. And that's the number one thing that we're really looking for is like, hey, have you done these events before? Do you have the experience to do these types of high-end events? And that's kind of, if they check all those boxes, that's where we start.
I think that's so important and so true that you say that, because I've spoken to many a large kind of corporate or big organizer before. I'm talking people like Adobe, Salesforce, these kind of organizations. And when you actually look at the technology or partners or companies that they have working for them, there's lots of options in those fields often, right? Maybe there's an event app, there's tons of event app companies out there. Maybe it's interpretation. There's quite a few companies out there. And working with a local partner in the region is obviously important. But what it boils down to, these companies choose service and support most of the time over everything else, because they want to be really, really confident that everything's getting dealt with accurately in the lead up to the show, and that those teams supplying those products and solutions or that equipment or whatever it is are there on site as their partners, ready to go should anything inevitably not go to plan, because this is events and not everything does go to plan. And people are willing to pay a lot of money for that security,
assurance,
that service, and that quality. And I think that's where a lot of other companies coming into the market often, maybe they're newer to the market, they often think they just focus on price, right? And actually, that's not the biggest driving decision for a lot of these companies when it comes to actually choosing the partner for their show.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the price, is it a commodity? Is it not? Yeah. Those sort of things. But you don't want to pick the lowest price, especially for interpretation equipment, which not saying we picked the price, but definitely there's levels of what you're going to get, and you kind of get what you pay for.
Well, let's get a bit into that then. Let's talk a little bit about interpretation, multilingual events, and things like that. This is something for me. We've invested in Event Tech Live for a number of years. Luckily, we've got good partners as ourselves that have helped support us learn what good looks like and equip our attendees with the ability to listen in their preferred language, as well as closed captioning and things like that. But we've learned tons along the way, right?
Yeah.
I think one of our biggest learnings is making it visible and accessible to people. We can put the equipment in and we can put the technology in, but if people don't know that it's there, then
Yeah.
they don't necessarily use it. And I think since COVID, I don't know whether this is the same for you, I've seen it actually become more of a priority, especially for events that have an international audience, that want to grow that international audience. And very much so, I think for me, and I don't know whether you feel the same, it's almost becoming, I'm going to use the word mandatory, which might be a strong word, but almost expected by attendees that they can listen in their preferred language or their native language, rather than having to listen in the dominant language, which we all choose, which is kind of English and things like that. And I will come on to later what I'm seeing in the wider technology scope. But to that, is that something you're seeing as well, that the expectation is very much now from, or are organisers and agencies and brands investing in that to make it more accessible?
Yeah, I mean, so from my perspective, we're only doing multilingual events, so I don't know who's not using multilingual solutions.
Very good point.
But definitely the clients that we do have are investing more in it, and they're trying to get into more solutions or provide more interpretations for, for instance, a lot of our clients, previously would only provide interpretation for the main platform, the plenary sessions, right?
Yeah.
And now you see, let's expand into the breakout sessions or the focus group sessions or whatever they might have. And so we're definitely seeing the interpretation scope expand there. We're also seeing, being in San Francisco myself, Silicon Valley they were never really a client of ours on a lot of, for interpretation services. A lot of them just didn't provide it up until the past maybe like 5 or 6 years. And now you see it's almost, it's almost mandatory. Like every event that they're doing, every product launch, they really want to globalize what they're doing. So they want to make sure it's in, 10, 12 different languages. So they're really reaching out to everybody. So I'm definitely seeing that aspect grow on the technology and kind of the corporate side. And then also kind of within people who have been using interpretation, expanding their offerings.
Within their existing offerings, yeah. And what do you think are what are the biggest technical hurdles that any organizer should be thinking about? My assumption is Wi-Fi being the biggest backbone bugbear of getting good connectivity, or does it not require Wi-Fi and those kind of comms channels and things like that? Can you put other things in place? What should organizers be really aware of if they're only just getting into this?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of different solutions in order to deliver interpretation to an on-site event. When you're talking about the remote style of event or the bring your own device where people can listen to interpretation from your phone, that's where you start getting into Wi-Fi. And without a really, really strong Wi-Fi network, bring your own device isn't going to work. If you don't have great, internet connectivity or reliable internet connectivity, remote's not going to work. But as a standalone, kind of the traditional equipment is what we call it, where you hand out receivers to all the attendees and you have interpreters sitting in booths, in the back of the room. That requires, no Wi-Fi or connectivity at all. That's a standalone system. So that's definitely, today, it's still the most reliable system, assuming everybody's in one meeting room and they, and the interpreters are in one meeting room and everybody's together. It's very easy and very few things go wrong. But I mean, you're not dealing with outside forces that could potentially, drop and cause an issue with the meeting.
Yeah, we ourselves very much went immediately down, let's just provide a headset for attendees on every single chair, with a hygiene kind of process in place to clean them for the next attendees and things like that. Because there's always that element of, I think the headset for me automatically indicates to somebody to put it on, which we see our audiences do. Pretty much like 90+% of the audience actually put a headset on. We do have a little bit of PA as backup and stuff. And then they're already there. The next easy step is just to let them know that if they want to listen in French, they can. If they want to listen in Italian, they can. German, Greek, whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas before, on other events, and I was at one recently that had AI interpretation, it was scan a QR code. And unfortunately for me, the organizer got that wrong because the QR code was only visible to people before the actual holding slide for the panel went up.
Oh, and then it was gone.
Which was just like people were still arriving, and people
Yeah.
don't turn up to these sessions like 15 minutes before and are sat there waiting for it to start. They
Right.
maybe turn up just as it starts or something like that. So for me, it got lost, and I don't think most people were aware
Yeah.
that it was actually available to them as well there.
This is what we're telling meeting plan, or well in advance, make sure that the attendees know that you have interpretation, and also make sure your documentation and everything is translated in advance, right?
Yeah.
So when you're sending out, hey, this is how you join a meeting, don't just send it out in English, but localize it and send it out in all the languages that you're offering interpretation, so that they know that it's going to be there. Also in the meeting app, where you see all the sessions, list which languages it's in, so they say, oh, I can join this session, I can join that session. And then the last thing that we do, the QR codes are huge. Obviously, if you can put a direct link in the app as well, click, direct to click on that link to listen to the interpretation. Also, we've gone as far as like holding the lollipop signs and have people like running up and down the aisles with those. Hey, scan the QR code to listen to interpretation. So there's a lot of, this is kind of a new technology. It's been around for maybe 5 years of doing the bring your own device and using AI and things like that. But we're figuring this all out as well as like, hey, how can we make sure that everybody knows that they have interpretation if we don't give them a physical device?
Yeah, just make it super, super visible, right? Like
Right.
do as much as you can to to educate people that it's there as a tool and a support technology for them. Make it accessible to them, and then you'll get the adoption.
Right.
We've kind of touched a little bit on human interpreters, and obviously you also work with AI interpretation as well. Pros and cons of both. How do people choose which route to go down in terms of their choice, and is there even an opportunity to use a blended I guess experience where there are both options on site?
Yeah, I mean, so today we still recommend that everybody uses human interpretation if they can, right? There's obviously some limitations. There's some scenarios where maybe AI makes more sense. The biggest one is obviously budget. It's a lot cheaper to have AI interpreters than human interpreters. Are the human interpreters available? If not, then AI is also a solution. But there's still kind of a lot of drawbacks to AI where it's a little bit inconsistent, especially if it's a very high profile meeting and you want to make sure everything is interpreted accurately. The human is still, I think, the way to go. And so we always recommend it to our clients. With that being said, AI is a great solution for, as I was touching on earlier, hey, we don't have the budget to offer all these breakout rooms and hire, 50 interpreters to be in every single one of these breakout rooms.
Yeah.
AI is a great solution for that.
Yeah.
It's the next best option. Also, if you can't find an interpreter in the last minute, right? It's, we're doing an event in Dubai and we need a German interpreter. Hey, there's no German interpreter here. One, you can do it remote, or you use, an AI interpreter. And we also see it where they're actually expanding on their language options. So we did an event last month or a couple months ago where they had 2 or 3 people from Lithuania come into the event. Mm-hmm. They didn't want to fly out the interpreters and have them in booths. So we just we can patch in the AI to the existing and human interpretation. We can deliver it the same way. It can go onto your physical receiver. It can be a bring your own device sort of thing. So yeah, we can kind of figure out where AI can suit the client best, but if there's an option to have human interpretation, we still recommend that because we think it's just a higher level of service.
Is that because it's more accurate that you would say? Is that the crux of it, that it's human interpreters are going to be at this moment in time more accurate than more reliable than the AI?
I mean, if you did like a comparison and you're just reading a book, maybe AI is just as accurate as a human, but there's just a lot of nuance to the way that people speak.
Inflection, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So sarcasm obviously is something that you're not going to pick up on.
Yeah.
You and I are both speaking English, but we actually speak English much differently, right? So if, we're talking about, putting something in, you're putting your groceries in the back of your car, you might say, I'm putting it in my boot. And then I'll say, oh, it's a trunk. And then, the difference between trunk and boot means the same thing to us, but to AI, it might be, I'm putting groceries in my shoe. Like it doesn't, so some of these things come up where that, a human interpreter would obviously, know the difference. So accents are big. what else, like idioms and things like that. So these things are kind of getting lost. And so sometimes it's perfect. We'll be at an event and you'll just follow along and everything's great. And then other times it really just depends on the speaker and the context. And that's that.
Yeah.
It's that confidence in it, for me at least, where I'm like, yes, we can provide AI, but I can't guarantee it's going to be, the best experience for the users.
I'm going to put you on the spot then.
Okay.
and ask you a difficult question, because this is a topic that's coming up a lot, and obviously it's part of the conversation. And I think we are seeing it, AI replacing human roles and jobs. I think there's a very recent story of IBM laying off 8,000 HR professionals across their staff globally because they've now replaced it with, to a great deal, this HR tool, AI tool, that they've been using clearly internally for a while. I think it's even a product that they're now looking at kind of rolling out and selling to other companies, which is also slightly worrying that all of a sudden 8,000 is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to people in HR roles. Do you think there will be a point in which AI translation means that there is no longer a need for a human interpreter?
I think it's inevitable that will happen. As far as the timeline, I'm not confident it'll happen in 3 to 5 years, for instance. When I started working in interpretation, and this is before 2010, I'd always heard, in 5 years, there's not going to be any human interpreters. And now we're 2025 and still human interpreters are dominating the market. So I don't think it's as quick as people might think to take over. With that being said, when it kind of first came out at the beginning of, 2023, and now we're 2.5 years later, the accuracy, the latency has gone down considerably. The voices are much better. And there's a lot of people working on, this technology to make it work, which is interesting for the world of interpretation, because the world of interpretation technology it was very slow moving. We're still using radios kind of that were invented in the 1950s up until, 5 years ago, people were using these regularly. And so not a lot of money was invested in interpretation. Now you're seeing, a lot of startup companies developing their own AI, developing their own language models and everything. So I don't think in the next 3 to 5 years it's going to replace interpreters, but I think inevitably, 10, 15 years down the road, you might see fewer and fewer human interpreters working at events.
Let me ask you another follow-up question that also might be one to put you on the spot. We're now seeing lots of the large technology providers, Samsung, Apple, Meta, rolling out devices that have some of this built in, right? So Apple recently announced, and it was a software update, so it actually backdates on the AirPod Pro 3s, but you can actually now get this software update on the AirPod Pro 2s, which it does obviously the active listening for it. And then there's an interpretation there. Now, obviously, that's very much aimed at a consumer level experience of, maybe being on holiday and just wanting to have a very short, brief conversation and things like that. But again, that looks like the start of this technology actually becoming, maybe in the next decade, kind of ubiquitous when it comes to the devices that we have just as general consumers and things like that. Does that mean that, and maybe again the time horizon is not 10 years, but could that also mean the death of interpretation companies with the events industry, because the organizer knows that most attendees are going to come with these devices, the true bring your own device, because they've got the software on it as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't see it happening that quickly. I mean, just even doing the bring your own device in a controlled environment that we provide, there's a setup, there's a link that everybody can join. It's very intuitive and easy to use. We still have maybe 10% of the audience that has, challenges. Their phone isn't right for it, whatever the case may be. There's still difficulties there. So I want to think that these technologies are moving quicker. But again, on the consumer basis, the Meta and all these things, I think they're solving a different problem. Yeah. Something else that you want to have control of is, you want to be able to upload specific libraries and stuff. As as an event planner and whoever the end client is, you want to have their index of what words they use, what their algorithm or what their acronyms are, and everything like that. So you really want to have more of a controlled environment, I think, for event interpretation, as opposed to just kind of consumer level, throw everything in there and kind of hope it works. Yeah. So that management of the AI interpretation, I think, will be key for a while as well.
Yeah, I think there's also, we have to look at so many events that have conversations or information that are sensitive, right? It might be a product launch. It might be something in defense or something like that, right? Where actually personal devices are just, they're not allowed, right? And they even go to extra extent of creating, soundproofed environments and things like that, so that there's no kind of like leakage of information and things like that. So I guess in those scenarios, it doesn't matter how much technology the actual attendees got on them. They're just not going to be able to use it because it's going to get taken off them, right?
Yeah, I mean, we use infrared technology, which is, line of sight infrared light in rooms. For that very reason, it's way more secure. So if you're using FM or radio frequency and broadcasting it, it can get leaks and it's a security issue. So all those companies use IR now. Never mind going into the cloud and trusting that to work. So definitely for a while, it's going to be using this traditional technology for those kind of meetings.
Yeah, I guess even where we are right now in the Middle East, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and I'm pretty sure other locations, not just the Middle East, there are actually sensitivities to AI technologies being used in and around, obviously for privacy and things like that as well. So I would imagine that that's another reason that the human interpreters will state, okay, they might retain the knowledge and information, but it's not, like you say, being put up to the cloud and digitized, and then where does that go after that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still learning about the Dubai market, but from what I understand, a lot of the traditional equipment is still the top equipment that people are using, and using AI or bring your own device, or these things are not being used on a regular basis, and they're not as accepted as maybe they are in different countries, like in the US, where people are always just trying to use the latest and the greatest technology and things like that.
Yeah.
The traditional equipment is working fine and there's no reason to change it, which I kind of agree with as well. So
do you think that way of thinking in the US is very much based on wanting to be seen as a leader in a field and at the bleeding edge of like event design and events and things like that?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's a need to use the newest technology. Other time it's just, hey, we're using the newest technology because it's the newest technology sort of thing. So definitely, people request for, some of the newer technologies, and I'm like, this isn't really solving a problem for you. It's actually creating more complexities in your event. Yeah. But from whoever's making these decisions, they want to make sure they're up on the cutting edge of these sort of things. So as you're saying, are they the cutting edge or the bleeding edge? And you don't know. You don't want to draw that. You don't want to cross that line and use the wrong technology for your event. So.
Yeah. I guess one of my other thoughts is, and we've kind of touched this on a little bit, but there is quite a competitive landscape out there in the field, in different regions, different companies offering, I guess, the same thing, maybe in slightly different ways and stuff like that. What do you see as kind of like conference rentals, kind of, how do you differentiate yourself from others in the market? What do the customer testimonials say about you guys?
Yeah, I think we kind of specialize in the mid to large size events first off, and then we also specialize in complex events, really combining different technologies together, making custom solutions.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm here in Dubai. We have an event in Abu Dhabi next week, and this is a very customized solution for the conference microphones. They have specific voting, a specific way of voting. They have specific interpretation needs for both on-site and remote. They have a certain way of who can speak next within a meeting. So they need a different way of queuing everybody. So they're queuing remote people, they're queuing people on site. So we really have a way of utilizing a bunch of different technologies, putting them all together and like coming up with a very unique solution for clients. And that's kind of what our specialty is we have that secret sauce of different technologies. We're pulling them all together. We have all the different gear that we use and all the different software that we're using in order to put this all together. So that's kind of our little
I bet your tech stack is crazy. I bet all of those different things, like I'm not saying it's like this, but I just imagine like spaghetti and things plugged into each other.
I mean, essentially that's how it is. Fortunately, with everything being in computers and software now, you need a lot less equipment and a lot less cables than you used to. And what's interesting is we're all kind of becoming, and I'm sure everybody you talk to in the event industry, we're all kind of becoming IT people as opposed to AV people.
Yeah.
So I think probably pre-2020, we owned as a company maybe like 15 computers, and we would send them to do some software things. Now we probably have, I don't know, maybe 100 different computers, and we have all these Dante and network switches and everything. And so, you know, it kind of is what it is. You're just becoming more of an IT solutions provider in these situations.
I'd agree with that. I think, you know, the events industry for probably all of my career, or maybe from the beginning of time, the skill set for successful events, and this is still the case, I'm not taking away from these, have been those obviously bringing revenue in for those events, whether they're kind of selling sponsorships, getting delegates to come along, those kinds of things, or maybe the event kind of designers and deliverers, the operations teams, the event directors, the event managers, you know, producing the event producers, producing the event and things like that. But I think we're actually seeing a shift where those in the technology and technical roles are actually increasing in their need within organizations. I don't know whether you came across this recently. Just recently, Salesforce advertised for somebody who was heading up event technology for them, and the starting salary was $400,000.
Oh, wow. I didn't see that.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously, super large organization, probably also managing a team across the globe, and I would dread to think how many kind of internal, external, and participatory events they are part of. So I'm sure that person is probably still not paid enough. But, you know, I think that's a sign that, you know, these skill sets are really starting to be valued within organizations to make technologies sing, and therefore they're partners who really understand the events industry. But that also, for me, presents a challenge. Like, how do you see, you know, how do conference rentals go about bringing the right talent and attracting the right talent into your business so that the rest of the events industry can kind of benefit from that? How do you go out? Because you yourself even fell into this kind of role.
Of course.
It wasn't something you kind of had a vision for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely the guys that we use to do our events, mostly technicians, they all have audio-visual backgrounds, yeah. Right? And fortunately, most of them realized that they need to learn these other skill sets, yeah. Or else they're going to get left behind. And there is a group of these guys who are not willing to learn these additional skill sets, right. And it's becoming harder and harder to find, you know, the right jobs to put them on, for sure. So most of the things, I mean, from the IT, you're really just using, it's almost consumer level IT skills that you need to set these things up. You don't need to dive into the weeds. You don't need to know programming or anything like that. But it's just learning like how to set up a Dante network, how to set up, you know, how to troubleshoot, you know, internet. All these various things, you know, you need to learn, and you can't be afraid of it, right? Just like you wouldn't be with, you know, setting up a mixer and a soundboard or something like that. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to train the guys on this. Like before we're doing an event, we'll do like refresher courses, you know, if they haven't used it for a while. So most of the guys that we use are specialized in their audio techs for interpretation specifically. And so they already have like, you know, a very niche market of people that or events that they can do. And so really getting these guys up and running with the IT and the new kind of technologies is super important for us.
And my understanding is that the companies providing the hardware, software, technology for you, they're also rolling out training courses and skill courses and things like that to be able to, for you to be able to make the best of those technologies, correct?
Yeah, of course. Like all the various, RSI, the remote simultaneous interpretation platforms, they'll all provide, trainings of how to use their platforms, the connectivity, things like that. Like Dante offers their own free training courses, and you can become certified and things like that.
Yeah.
So, and then there's tons of IT classes that you can take to just understand the basics of what you need to know in order to set up networks and things like that. So all that information is readily available, and training is quite easy. You just have to be willing and, excited about learning the new technology, right?
Yeah, I can remember maybe more than a decade ago, maybe even been closer to 2 decades ago. Have you heard of a company called Britannia Row? They're a large rock and roll kind of audio touring company in the UK. All the big, famous rock bands kind of touring around the UK or Europe, and they do. They had this real challenge of getting talent in. So they ultimately ended up creating their own, in the UK, I think we call it an MVQ, kind of like a vocation qualification.
Right,
so you learn and you get qualified, certified as you kind of work on the job and things like that. And that was the only way that they could get that young talent into the business and teach them from the ground up exactly how that part of the industry worked. Because it was just, there was no other way, there was no other access into the industry. And actually a lot of those youngsters that came through into those roles, they loved it because they were into rock and roll. So this was like their dream, to be working on these gigs, front of house, like mixing for these famous bands or doing the audio setup and on the road and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting how I think it's a big challenge across the events industry. How do we attract, train, retain, and kind of develop that talent within the industry when, I guess, from anybody looking outside, there's all of these shiny kind of, be a content creator, go work in Silicon Valley in tech, or the latest one, isn't it? Don't become your own boss and vibe code your way to be a billionaire kind of thing. So I guess coming to like my last thoughts on this, you've been in the industry for clearly a long time now. You've seen probably the industry change. You've clearly been through a financial recession, a COVID period. What excites you about the future of the events industry? And also to that, maybe what are you excited that's maybe possibly potentially coming down the line for multilingual events and interpretation and those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it earlier, but multilingual events are becoming more popular, I think, right? They're becoming more mainstream. Yeah. And that's, for me, that's exciting from a business opportunity, but also from, people knowing what you're talking about sometimes, right? So, if I went on maybe this podcast 10 years ago, nobody would, most audio people and event people that you talk to, they don't know what interpretation is. It was, an afterthought. And I think that's kind of one of the most exciting things is, more people are used to kind of dealing with interpretation, especially just, going on the internet and seeing captions on the bottom of their video screens, or, you go on your LinkedIn or whatever, and somebody's writing a post in a different language, and then you say, see translation, right? And so all these things are just becoming more and more mainstream. And so what we've been doing is just becoming more popular and more commonplace and more accepted, I think. And I think it's exciting, especially for not only the event industry, but just for the language industry in general. It's an exciting time to get more people to be able to speak their native tongue and more accessibility to everybody, and really kind of meet, right? You can meet globally more easily, understand what everybody's saying. So I think that's it's a pretty exciting time, and I think it's only going to get better.
Yeah, and I think some of that myself will be driven by legislation. Like accessibility for people is paramount. Maybe not so much interpretation, but closed captioning for me. That's like, it's so easy to do closed captioning now at events. You can put a couple of delay screens up and have that text there and stuff. Yeah,
I think a huge thing is just AI closed captioning is fantastic, right? It's faster than a human typing. It almost, as you're hearing it, you can see it up on the screen immediately. If it's primarily a bilingual meeting, you can easily have two languages
Yep.
up on the screen, right? And so people, they don't even need to have a device or anything. They can just read and follow what's going on. So it's, the technology's there. It's just, you gotta, once it's, accepted, then it's gonna just grow exponentially.
And then my final question for you is, lots of events, huge creators of content. In fact, every event creates content, right? Whether that's through small meetings, large meetings, plenary sessions, the breakout sessions, whatever. We're content creators when we produce an event. And lots of organizations are now investing heavily in capturing that content in various different ways so it can exist afterwards. Because inevitably, as humans, we are terrible at also remembering things. And I know at my event, we have 4 sessions concurrently happening
Right.
at the same time, so you can't split yourself in 4 different places. Are you also taking a role in helping make that content post-event accessible in multiple languages and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, almost every event we do, we're recording all the languages and having them available for later viewing or listening. The multiple languages obviously add a complexity. It can't just be one video. You need, a video and either embedded like channel selector to select which language you're listening to, or you need to put subtitles over it in many different languages. We actually, what's interesting is we've done a lot of events which haven't even really been live events. We're like recording events and we're recording them all in different languages, and then they're just streaming these events now kind of when they want to, right? When the client wants to put them out. So not only are we doing this for live meetings and events and the people in the room, but we're actually, a broader audience. If there's nobody actually on site, we're recording it. They get, 10 takes of the same thing. So it's really like more of a produced event that's become more and more popular, I think, since COVID, when people couldn't meet, in person regardless. So it's become a thing that we're doing. And then the archiving of all those, all that content with all the various languages. Why not? It's easy to do and it's accessible. So
Maybe even podcasts in the future, so people can listen to. Because I've not come across that really. I don't think maybe I've not been looking hard enough for it, but I've certainly not come across anything that supports me at the moment. Thinking about our platform that would allow people to listen
in a
to
different
in a
language.
different language.
Yeah, there's tricks you can do on like YouTube. Like YouTube, you can do. I think you can switch between like different camera angles, and you can kind of trick it into each camera angle is actually its own language. So the video would be the same, but you would actually switch the source. You can have, I think it's up to 8 different camera angles, for instance. So we've done this before where you can actually manipulate YouTube to have like 8 different languages on the same content. So
See, that's the value of experience right there. We can hack YouTube.
yeah, it's not a hack. It's not hacking it, but yeah, it's just a workaround.
YouTube are going to shut that down.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much for taking the time to carve time out of your trip to the Middle East to come and speak to me in person. I totally agree with you. I think multilingual and interpretation is fundamentally a way to make your event more accessible and grow your audience. We've seen that by being able to attract more attendees from across Europe and other locations by offering that service. And I think you're right that the adoption is only going to go up and going to increase as events grow and expand and implement this. But for anybody that wants to kind of connect with you or reach out and have a look at conference rentals in a little bit more detail, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, I mean, you can either find me personally on LinkedIn, Andrew Murphy, or conferencerental.com and email us. And yeah, thank you for having us on. This is a great platform. I don't think there's a lot of event tech platforms, so I think what you're doing is great, and it was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, just want to shine a light on what I think organizations and companies really changing fundamentally the way that we get engagement at events and provide value to our attendees. So yeah, thank you for coming on.